in the aftermath of the Supreme Court judgment, when, as we've heard most speakers talk about, this thirst for blood and the thirst for the execution of the death sentence. And I must say that's when I decided to revisit the record of the case, and I did. And what I found was actually quite appalling. And it occurred to me that as a practicing lawyer, there was such clear evidence in the record that Afzal was going to his death without being represented by a lawyer, without actually being represented by a lawyer. And this is not something that I am saying out of personal knowledge, nor is it something that I'm saying based on my being present in the courtroom when the trial took place, but this is something that I'm saying based on the actual orders passed by Justice Dhingra. And here's what happened. He was produced in court. We all know that he wasn't given a lawyer at the point of time of his arrest. A gross violation of the Constitution of India, which says that at the point of arrest, a person has to be given a lawyer at state expense. Now, leaving that aside, when he was produced in court, after the confession had already happened, a woman by the name of Seema Gulati was standing in the courtroom, and Justice Dhingra told her, "Why don't you represent Afzal?" Remember that Afzal doesn't know this name, has never seen this woman, doesn't know who she is, and she mysteriously agrees. And on the very day that she agrees to represent him, she admits that he knew the identity of the people who were killed in Parliament. Now, how anybody could come to that conclusion? On meeting Afzal in jail, I asked him whether she had actually met him at any point of time prior to making this admission on his behalf, and his answer was no. He had never actually met this woman or spoken to her. At some point during the trial, she then withdrew her appearance and started appearing for another accused. At which point Justice Dhingra said to Afzal, "Now I'm going to find another lawyer to represent you," and he named Neeraj Bansal, who was the junior of Seema Gulati. That was that. Afzal didn't know either of these names or either of these persons, and neither of them had been to Tihar jail to do an interview with him to ask him what was his story. At one point, what happened was Afzal, in cross-examination, a witness was being asked whether Afzal had helped Muhammad to purchase a car. Now, Afzal's own version was yes, that he had, and Neeraj Bansal, his lawyer, was denying this. At that point, Afzal turned around and sacked his lawyer, and he said, "You are not my lawyer because you're not allowing me to admit to the truth." Now, this is recorded in a court order. What happened after that is very curious. Two things could happen. The only thing that could read, two things could happen. One, that he could continue being unrepresented. And two, that he could get a lawyer of his choice. Neither of these two things happened. What the judge did, he appointed the very same Neeraj Bansal as what is known as an amicus curiae. Now, we still continue to use this strange language in court, but an English translation of amicus curiae would be a friend of the court. This is a literal translation of the expression amicus curiae. So Afzal goes to his death being represented in court by what is known as a friend of the court. Now, where I ask is his right to representation. It simply isn't there. And all this, I promise you, is part of the court record. I did not get it from anywhere else. I didn't get it from personal knowledge. I did not get it from Afzal. I got it from reading Justice Dhingra's order. He says, "I hereby appoint Neeraj Bansal a friend of the court." And it is on this basis that I was unable to prevent myself from making a statement that I think a curative petition should be filed in the Supreme Court to say, asking for a declaration that there has been a mistrial. In all my 40 years at the bar, I have yet to see a case where a person is sent to his death without representation, without legal representation. We live in a country which claims to be democratic and swears by the rule of law. At the very least, it requires that an indigent accused be represented by a lawyer at state expense. And thereby hangs another tale. Because we do have a legal services authority in this country, a state-mandated legal services authority, which, believe me, is very, very well funded. And now where is all this money going is a big question. And when I looked at the rules relating to representation of indigent persons at state expense, I found that there is an upper limit of rupees 3,000 to be paid to the lawyer appointed at state expense to represent a person who is liable to suffer a death sentence. Now I ask you, in a country where the legal profession is privatized and where eminent lawyers, incidentally, all those who have gone public making statements, be it Arun Jaitley, be it Mahari Salve, I don't know, name them all, could be charging anything up to 6 to 7 to 8 lakhs of rupees per day for appearances in court. You pay 3,000 rupees to a lawyer who is supposed to represent a person going to death penalty. A greater violation of constitutional rights cannot be imagined. So these were the considerations that impelled me to give what is known as a certificate. There is a law which says that notwithstanding that the Supreme Court has come to a final decision, if a senior lawyer is of the opinion that there has been a miscarriage of justice, then a certificate has to be issued by a senior lawyer, and then the court is willing to revisit the issue perhaps. So I did issue a certificate, which I was, of course, reluctant to share, but when Arundhati asked me, and the reason I was reluctant to share it is because the petition is probably being filed today, or perhaps tomorrow. And normally we are forbidden to release documents before the petition is actually filed. But in this case, I felt that my loyalty to the cause went beyond my loyalty to the rules of the Supreme Court. And so I agreed to share the certificate with Arundhati. I have no way of knowing what the Supreme Court will do in this petition. But I believe that if there is a window of opportunity for Afzal through the law, then it has to be utilized, and that is why the certificate was given. A few years ago, the Supreme Court, on the 50th anniversary of the Constitution, published a book. And the only really interesting thing about the book was its title. It said, Supreme Court, supreme but not infallible. And I hope that the Supreme Court will live up to that title and admit that they have made a monumental mistake in imposing the death penalty on Afzal. Thank you.